Good afternoon. It's Monday the 9th of September 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today in the studio is Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Well, lots going on. Boris is in Dublin, meeting up with Leo Varadkar, who's the Taoiseach over there, the Prime Minister of Ireland. Well, it was a friendly meeting, it seemed, but Leo was also somewhat firm in his remarks. Let's have a listen to this.
Good morning, everyone. Members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, first of all, I really want to very sincerely welcome you to Ireland, and I look forward to our conversation this morning. I think we can both agree that we have much to discuss. First of all, allow me to say that we respect the democratic and sovereign decision of the British people to leave the European Union. We meet this morning at a point where it is the stated intention of the British government to leave the European Union on the 31st of October, with or without a deal. However, in my view, the story of Brexit won't end if the United Kingdom ends the European Union on the 31st of October, or even the 31st of January. There's no such thing as a clean break, or just getting it done. Rather, we'll just move on to a new phase.
So he was quite he was a bit stronger in some of the other comments that he made. He said all it does is kick the can down the road for another 14 months, another 14 months of uncertainty for business, another 14 months of uncertainty for people north and south of the border. So that's not an option that we find attractive at all. The stakes are high. Avoiding a return to a hard border is a priority for this government. We're open to all alternatives legally workable, but we've not received any such to date. And he said the Good Friday Agreement is the best example to show that old foes can come together and as co-guarantors of that agreement. So it was kind of mixed rhetoric from Mr. Varadkar. He's clearly extremely concerned about the economic issues surrounding this, which we'll come on to in a moment. And he said some things that were quite forceful, but attempted to be slightly conciliatory at the same time, it seems. So let's have a listen to Boris's main concerns. His first concern was over the situation with the Northern Ireland Assembly.
As you rightly say, Taoiseach, before November, there are two tasks, political tasks, that we simply have to do. And we must restore the government in Stormont, in Northern Ireland, and I promise to work with you on our shared objective there. And, of course, we must get Brexit done, because the UK must come out on October the 31st, by October the 31st, or else I fear that permanent damage will be done in the UK to trust in our democratic system.
So this was quite an important statement. So yes, okay, he's going to work with Varadkar to get the Northern Ireland Assembly back up and running again, and that he sees as a key thing. But he makes a very important point here that if Britain doesn't leave by the 31st of October, he sees that as doing permanent damage to British democracy and the British governance in Britain. So I think that's not an exaggeration. But then the question is, where does he stand on this? And you know, he has said on no uncertain terms, it seems, that we are leaving, deal or no deal. But he made it clear, and this is really the strongest words that I've heard from him. He made it clear that he wants a deal.
So I have one message that I want to land with you today, Leo, and that is that I want to find a deal. I want to get a deal. Like you, I've looked carefully at no deal. I've assessed its consequences, both for our country and yours. Yes, of course, we could do it. The UK could certainly get through it, but be in no doubt that outcome would be a failure of statecraft for which we would all be responsible. And so, for the sake of business, of farmers, and for millions of ordinary people who are now counting on us to use our imagination and creativity to get this done, I want you to know I would overwhelmingly prefer to find an agreement.
So he would overwhelmingly prefer to find an agreement. He absolutely wants a deal. The question is, why is this meeting so important? Patrick, you can talk a little bit about the economics of this situation, but it seems to me that since the backstop is the main issue here, and obviously these are the two prime ministers of the countries that are affected by this backstop, I get the impression that he feels that if he can unlock Leo Varadkar, he can probably unlock the rest of the European Union.
Well, probably the two most significant things about this meeting this morning is that you have the acknowledgement by the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, of British sovereignty. In other words, he's saying we recognize the British people's decision to leave the EU. This is coming from a European member state alongside the supposedly divisive character in Boris Johnson, the arch Brexiteer. But at the same time, Boris Johnson's acknowledging that he wants a deal. So those two things together, I think, make this a significant meeting this morning. But I think it should be pointed out, Mike, that from the beginning of this Brexit process, Ireland has been pretty much discounted, if not completely ignored, by those driving the Brexit conversation from the beginning in mainstream politics and in mainstream media. So I think you can point the finger of blame on both of those entities, mainstream politicians and media, including Boris Johnson himself and pretty much everybody else in the Tory government. It's been an afterthought. And of course, they should have known, Mike, from the very beginning that it always would end up with Ireland. And that is the main issue. So the point, Mike, is that these are two interlocked economies, Britain and Ireland, Great Britain, UK, and Republic of Ireland. They're so interlocked, in fact, that in terms of UK exports, just to give you an indication, the UK exports more to Ireland than it does to China, India, and Brazil ×2 combined. That's what a big trading partner Ireland is, and I can go through a number of different sectors. The retail sector is totally intermingled with the UK in terms of supply chains. Every sandwich you get in Marks and Spencer's in Ireland is made in Britain with Irish products. So there's supplies going both ways, and that's just a little indication of the food and agricultural sector. A third of the pork of Irish pork is processed in Northern Ireland, and a third of the milk in Northern Ireland is processed in the Republic, south of the border, which is used to make Baileys, in fact. Just as little trivia there. But I think that the point here, Mike, is that trading patterns changed when both countries entered the EU, and a massive reconfiguration of the economies as a result of being both members of the EU. In fact, the power grid, the energy sector on the island is a single market.
Well, I mean, this is a key point because it's not just about trading goods, it's also infrastructure.
It's power, it's a lot of different things like that. So by anyone's estimate, the Republic could lose something like 5% of GDP in the immediate aftermath of Brexit. And I don't know, between a no deal and a deal Brexit, that's 5 to 8%. So it could have a major impact on the economy in the South, and of course it might also have an impact on the Northern Irish economy too. So both sides are going to be affected by this. But it's also there's also another issue, Mike, that we can discuss in a later date, which is that Brexit has become a sectarian issue in Northern Ireland, especially, where unionists are more or less arch Brexiteers now, and Sinn Féin are more pro-Europe now. So that's a big switch from before, where Sinn Féin Republicans used to be more anti-EU in that sense. So it's become a sectarian issue. So positions have become more polarized. And this is a byproduct of the whole Brexit situation. So Ireland has a lot on its plate. In the north and the Republic as well as a result of this. And I think it's been hugely underestimated by the establishment in the UK. And I'll just finish this point off, Mike, by saying that when I spoke to people in the Republic when I was there recently, and also on both sides of the border, the general feeling in the South was that if Britain's not bullying us, we are very happy to want to be a team player and help the UK work this out, but they don't want to be have their terms dictated to them or being bullied by Britain. So that's an attitude I think that was very prevalent in the Republic. So this is really up to the leadership of the British government how they're going to go about.
But what's clear from what you've just said is that it is absolutely as important for the Irish government to end up with a deal here as it is, if we believe what Boris has just said, as it is for Boris. Economically
and many other things. So Ireland stands to lose a lot if things go wrong, even in the short term, Mike.
Now, Varadkar before this meeting was very keen to stress that this was not going to be a negotiation, but I have to say I don't really quite see it turning out that way. I think it can't be anything else at this stage.
Well, they have a lot of technical issues to work out with regards to whether there's going to be a backstop or a temporary backstop in lieu of some future solution coming down the road. There's all sorts of problems that are baked into this situation. So, not easy.
Absolutely. So what's next? Well, Boris Johnson is going to, apparently, according to most mainstream media, present MPs with some way to avoid prorogation by having another vote on a general election, possibly as early as later on today. There's going to be a debate in Parliament about the petitions, both supporting and opposing the prorogation of Parliament. So people posted petitions on the parliamentary website. Those garnered enough votes for them to be debated, so that's going to be going on. Michael Gove, you were talking about Michael Gove to me earlier, Patrick. He's appearing before another committee, this time the House of Lords EU committee, to give evidence about the government's Brexit negotiations and no-deal preparations. And he's going to be asked about how the preparations for a no-deal Brexit have been accelerated and what the biggest risks are and so on. But you were noticing that he was suddenly becoming the expert that all the various committees were inviting to speak about this?
Well, he's actually fronting a lot of the flack coming in the Tories' direction. Michael Gove is fielding pretty much everything that they're throwing at that side of the aisle, Mike. And I have to say, I watched the whole two and a half hours of the last hearing on the live stream, and he actually ran rings around his inquisitors. So there's been a major transformation. Michael Gove is definitely bringing his A game to this.
He knows his topic.
They're relying heavily on Michael Gove, and I don't see anybody else in the Conservative Party that could perform the way he has in the last couple of days. It's pretty surprising, actually.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, something else that Boris has been up to was making comments about what he might do with respect to the bill, soon to be an act, which is going to compel him to write to Brussels asking for an extension of Article 50. So he's basically said he's going to write to humbly request an extension of Article 50, changing the date the UK leaves the EU to the 31st of January 2020. But then he says, only joking. Because he's saying basically he's going to write a letter to them fulfilling the terms of the Act, and then he's going to write a follow-up letter saying basically, don't take me seriously. I was compelled to do that. It was under duress, so let's move on. Well, Lord Sumption, the former Supreme Court judge, was speaking on BBC Radio 4 this morning. And he was saying that the bill or the act, as it's about to become, says that he's got to apply for an extension. Not only has he got to send the letter, he's got to apply for an extension, and to send the letter and then try to neutralise it seems to me to be plainly a breach of the act. He went on to say, you've got to realise that the courts are not very fond of loopholes. They're going to interpret this act in a way that it gives effect to its obvious purpose, unless there's something in the act that makes it completely impossible to do so. And there isn't. And he said that the simplest way of enforcing the injunction, because this was a very big question that we were discussing before the programme here, Patrick, was, well, if Boris resigns and refuses to, because if you remember, he said he would rather die in a ditch than sign this letter. So if he resigns and refuses to sign the letter, then this could effectively trip a general election or so on. But what Sumption here is saying is the simplest way of enforcing the injunction would be for the court simply to direct an official to sign the letter on behalf of the PM and to declare that his signature was to be treated in every legal respect as equivalent to the Prime Minister's. I don't know what the constitutional implications of that are. I would say that that's a pretty dangerous direction to go in.
Yeah, that's shaky, potentially shaky ground there. I think the whole point of this, and I'm so glad that you quoted Lord Sumption, because he did a lecture series recently. I think it was with the BBC, but you can listen to it.
This was the Reith lectures?
Yes, the Reith lectures, and about the constitutional monarchy system and why Britain is better that Britain has an unwritten constitution rather than a written constitution like the United States. And the point was, he said that it would be terrible to have judges decide at the end of the day. And the irony of that, Mike, is that's exactly where we're heading right now. Definitely a potential Supreme Court showdown if this bill, this taking Brexit off the table, the anti-Brexit Hillary Benn number 6 bill, law, in fact, should receive royal assent today. Is that correct?
Well, I think it goes back to the Commons today, and then it'll receive royal assent very quickly. Yeah.
So if this is challenged in the courts after October 19th, when the Prime Minister comes back from the Brussels summit, Labour is saying, the opposition is saying 95% chance this will be upheld by Supreme Court. Of course, they're going to say that right now, but there is a chance that it might not be upheld. But either way, Boris Johnson is committed to going forward to the 31st, deal or no deal. So that's pretty clear. So the irony being, Mike, that this would somehow be decided in the court, and over the weekend we had Project Fear was kicking into high gear. Jail Boris. We're going to throw Boris in jail if he doesn't sign this. If he doesn't apply for it and put his name on it, he's going to jail. So Boris is getting the Trump treatment right now, because this is what they've been doing to Donald Trump for the last 2 years now straight, which is threatening to throw him in jail for just about everything you can imagine. Although this is quite a serious issue for the country here in the UK, but the media is sort of giving him the Trump treatment, which I think is pretty interesting. So I think the hysteria in terms of fear of a no-deal Brexit, you haven't seen anything yet.
No, it's going to ramp up significantly.
Absolutely, it's going to ramp up over the next 2 to 3 weeks. You're going to see stories like you've never seen before. It's going to be like Y2K apocalyptic hysteria all over again. If you remember the run-up to 2000, you remember the Y2K?
Yes. Okay,
so we all survived after the clocks ticked over to 2000, just to remind everybody, not many people died as a result of the Y2K anomaly. But it's still a serious issue. I'm not making light of all the potential pitfalls of a no-deal Brexit, but I'm also saying that the media is over-egging a lot of issues.
And later on in the programme, we'll be talking a little bit about disinformation and fake news, just to bring, just to end the programme with some extra irony, as if we needed it. Now, the question is, what's the European Union's attitude to all this? Well, here is the Dutch Trade Minister. At a point, enough is enough. At that stage, the certainty of deterioration might be better than continuing without perspective. At a certain point, there must be clarity. I'm not sure there's much clarity in that statement, but anyway, she went on to say, you have to see the context and see if there's a realistic expectation that this will lead to a follow-up phase, but so far the British have not presented an alternative to the Brexit agreement that's already in place. So they're basically saying there is no prospect of an extension. Many others within the European Union saying exactly the same thing. Now, what was number 10's response to this? Well, they are talking about refusing to appoint an EU commissioner. We will turn the pressure onto the EU to show how difficult it would be for them if the UK is still hanging around. So basically, if the UK is still, if there's an extension to the 31st of January and the UK is still a member of the European Union, then the Commission is required to have 28 commissioners. If it doesn't have 28 commissioners, then it's not a Commission. And so the UK talking about refusing to appoint an EU commissioner, effectively making the Commission illegal under EU law. And this is going to cause the Commission some difficulty. So this is another negotiating tactic, if you want to call it that. Number 10 said if they won't negotiate a deal, it would be ideal if they kicked us out. So what they're attempting to do here is to get the Commission and the European Union to kick the UK out. In other words, don't extend past the 31st of October. Say, well, tough luck then. You haven't got a deal, you're gone. Because otherwise, this is putting the European Union into some difficulties.
This has turned into a 4D game of bridge, Mike.
Absolutely.
Not forget about chess. So there's a number of moving targets in all directions.
Absolutely. Now the question then is, what are the chances of there being a general election? Personally, I think there's almost no chance at the moment, and the reason that I think that is because if you look at the way that the polls are moving, I don't put too much faith in the polls in terms of the actual figures that they produce, but if they're showing a direction of travel, then there's probably a bit more veracity to that. So the direction of travel clearly is that public opinion is heading towards Boris and all this. The rest of the House of Commons is digging a very big hole for itself in the approach that it's taking. But nonetheless...
I just want to say one thing, that this whole situation, by the way, Mike, it has exposed the dysfunctionality of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act of 2010-2011. Because when they drafted that particular piece of that law, they were never envisioning a situation where an opposition would refuse a call for a general election. You know, it's not something anybody could have foreseen at that time. So in the sense that all the mechanisms that are in place in order to sort of tame a snap election are now really dysfunctional in the fact that Labour and the opposition have refused. It's unheard of, basically. So it's really showed up the Fixed Term Parliaments Act as being something that's not really functioning properly. And in fact, this was in the Tories' manifesto, if I'm not mistaken, in the 2017 general election to repeal the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which hasn't happened yet. No. So that's something that's on the cards as well.
Well, in the meantime, certainly Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party getting ready, just in case, you never know. And he's tweeting out this morning, the Brexit Party will not stand against the ERG or any sitting MP who pledges to never vote for the new EU treaty. So what are your thoughts?
Well, Nigel Farage is now front and center. He wasn't for the last week, but now he's appeared. So as of the last 24 hours, the Farage effect is in play right now. So it's the prospects of an electoral pact between the Conservatives and the Brexit Party is now a reality. People are now strategizing and talking about it. So what Nigel Farage is proposing is quite simple in that he'll be allowed to field candidates in some Labour seats around the country, but also that he will be canvassing on behalf of Conservatives who are pro-leave, basically, at the same time. So in terms of the numbers, Mike, this would, by everyone's polling, this would lead to a thumping majority for the Brexit effort. So the Conservatives could conceivably form a pretty strong majority there in a general election. And that polling even rings true, Mike, after the 31st. For a general election after the 31st, it's still viable, this potential marriage of convenience. Let's look at that marriage of convenience, actually, here. So this is Nigel Farage comments to the Sunday Telegraph just this past weekend. The events of this summer confirm that the center of gravity in British politics is shifting inexorably in favor of Brexit. I've been arguing for this for years, and I'm only too delighted that the swamp is being drained at last, using Trumpian language there. And he goes on, and he said, "It is my sincere wish that other Remain agitators will follow the lead of disgraced figures like Oliver Letwin in retiring so that real democracy can be restored. So he's not pulling any punches, Mike, as Farage. This was an op-ed which he authored over the weekend in the Southern Telegraph. So he's taking a strong position, and he has some of the big power donors, Mike, behind him on this. So this has always been a worry, Mike, that is trying to align conservative Brexiteers with Brexit Party, with Farage's mob, and there's a potential there that they may be reading from the same page at last on this. And this is a major donor here. This is a conservative donor who's switched to backing Brexit, and Jeremy Hosking, and he's saying they, meaning the Tories, want to put the Brexit Party out of business while the Brexit Party wants to be put out of business. Thus, it's a perfect marriage of convenience. And he just goes on to say the donors realize this. They would prefer a credible two-step approach to getting out of the current Brexit predicament. It's a two-step approach, talking about fielding these candidates. It's a very pragmatic approach to a potential general election, rather than a Houdini-style masterstroke, some miracle strategy that everyone is looking for, wishing for. This is what would be the pragmatic approach here. And let's look at how this would play out, Mike, in terms of the electoral map. These are some of the seats that they might be targeting here. This is courtesy of the Sunday Telegraph as well. So you've got Yvette Cooper there in the Midlands, Mike, Tom Watson also there in West Bromwich, and Stephen Kinnock down in Wales, and also Ian Lavery in the north, Mike. So they're looking to target Remain seats, and the thinking is that a Brexit candidate could win in some of these districts, whereby maybe a Tory candidate might not be able to pull in some of the heartland Labour working class Brexiteers.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of commentary towards the end of last week about Labour supporters switching their allegiance. Would they switch go as far as to vote for the Tory party? This might be a sensible alternative for people that are long-time Labour supporters that just wouldn't want to support the Tory party.
The polling suggests that that would be the case. So this is how you could pry them away. And that would totally transform. I mean, you're looking at potentially, depending on when the general election is happening, Mike, the potential of them getting something like 400 seats in a coalition. So, I mean, it's this huge majority, potentially. And what this would do, I mean, this is definitely transforming the Conservative Party into a Brexit party. That's what's happening right now. But it would also potentially devastate Labour and turn it into a metropolitan rump, as Basil Valentine called it on the Sunday Wire yesterday. So, I mean, you're talking about a major realignment in British politics as a result of that general election, if that comes to pass. So that's historic.
Absolutely right. Okay, let's move on from Brexit then. Now, if you like what the UK Column does and you'd like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community, where there are options for doing that there. You can join us as a member, make a donation, and so on. Quick reminder that on Wednesday this week, GcMAF Awareness event taking place outside Parliament. People are meeting at 11 o'clock for an 11 minutes past 11 start. So get along to that if you possibly can. Ian R. Crane will be there, and hopefully we'll have him live on the programme on Wednesday to tell us what's been going on. And Ian running his 5G awareness presentations now, 7 p.m. for 7:30 start. It begins tonight in Bristol, Plymouth, Bournemouth, Portsmouth, Brighton, right the way through until the 11th of October in Cardiff. All the dates there on screen at the moment. Get along to one of those if you possibly can. And staying with 5G for a second, Totnes Council has decided to impose a 5G moratorium. Now, this doesn't have the weight of law, as it were, in the sense that the Mayor, Jackie Hodgson, has acknowledged that, I have to say, I don't think we'll get anywhere with it. But the more councils that do this, the more councils that do this, the more pressure it brings to bear. So why is she so pessimistic? Well, in this case, South Hams District Council has already said that under planning laws that the government has imposed, the District Council's Development Management Committee will be forced to ignore the local council moratorium. Glastonbury Council has also issued a ban. They're saying that they are relying on the precautionary principle for that. And it's quite interesting, Patrick, that as this big industry starts to roll out this equipment against the wishes of local communities, increasingly so, that the precautionary principle is virtually unheard of with respect to every other big campaign to get rid of smoking, for example. Precautionary principle was right at the heart of that. You as an industry cannot prove that smoking is safe for humanity. Therefore, we've got to take the precaution of banning it, or at least making it more and more difficult for people to smoke, banning it in public places and so on, because that's a sensible thing to do. But in this case, because in fact government is behind the rollout of 5G because they want to use it for its own communications and for military communications and so on, then precautionary principle thrown out the window. But nonetheless, it's good to see a town council. This seems to be the first town council to issue this type of moratorium. They've put their line in the sand. It may be overridden by bigger powers, but nonetheless, it's a positive step forward.
Well, I just want to add, though, that the precautionary principle, that door swings both ways as well. This is also the major justification for people wanting to roll out climate change policy. Absolutely. As well, saying that we have to do it just in case. Well, it's not quite the precautionary principle that you just described, but it's related in a way that, well, we should do it just in case as a precaution, even though there's no specific data as to if the climate is actually changing because of man-made CO2, aside from projections by the IPCC, UN scientific body. But that's a separate debate altogether. Absolutely. Maybe for another time.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move to international stuff and the long war in Afghanistan.
Yes, the long war in Afghanistan. How long? 18 years to be precise. We're coming up to the latest anniversary of September 11th of 9/11. So this is a big date on the calendar in America now. And so what's happening? Donald Trump's administration seems to be in hot water, Mike. They have pulled out, apparently, of negotiations with the Taliban. They were trying to hammer out a peace deal with the Taliban. We'll look at POTUS here. There he is in the Oval Office. And the Taliban talks hit the wall over deeper disagreements, Trump officials say, and there's a bit of a backwards and forwards going, different sides blaming each other, or the media basically trying to say that the Taliban actually pulled out and not Trump. This looks to be what the New York Times and some other people are inferring, but I think this is just kind of more anti-Trump rhetoric. The reality actually came out today in Al Jazeera here, as you can see. The Taliban are upset because Donald Trump has pulled out of, well, they had negotiations scheduled for Camp David, to have peace talks at Camp David in America. And of course, there's been a bit of a backlash to that as well. But let's look at what both sides are asking for here. So Team Trump and you have Team Taliban. And what are they asking for? Well, the United States is saying withdrawal of most U.S. troops by November 2020. There's approximately 16,000 U.S. troops there. The first lot would be 5,400 going within 135 days if this agreement was put on paper and signed by both sides. So the Taliban must start negotiations with the Afghan government. This is a precondition that's been put down by the United States. Reduce attacks near U.S.-controlled areas, remove al-Qaeda and ISIS from the country. This is what Team Trump are asking of the Taliban in order to basically get this deal signed. But now, this is what the Taliban are saying. No photo ops until we get a deal. and will you please leave our country? So using some Brexiteer language there, some Remain and Brexit language there by the Taliban. So their terms are pretty simple, Mike. They're playing the same game, and maybe Jeremy Corbyn's playing there, whereas we're not going to agree to anything until we get a deal. So they want deal first and then leave. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So this is the pro-war left here. This is Dean Obeidallah. He's on the U.S. mainstream media. He's a big voice, anti-Trump voice here. I think he identifies as a Muslim. I'm not sure, but very mainstream here. He's on Sirius Radio as well, big media personality. So Trump's way of observing the anniversary of 9/11 was to invite the people who were responsible for the terrorist attack to hang with him in Camp David. Taliban Trump is the hashtag. I'm just going to point out that that's not actually true, his statement there. The Taliban did not attack the United States on 9/11. Even if you believe the official story, it's still not the Taliban. It was supposedly, according to the official story anyway, Al-Qaeda attacked the United States. And that's, again, another whole separate rabbit hole of discussion that we could do in another date. But let's look at the situation right now. And this is one of the problems with all of these negotiations with Afghanistan. This is the pre-9/11 areas the Taliban were in control. You see the green areas, Mike?
Yeah.
That's Taliban control. That's pre-9/11. Okay, so about 90% of the country, 80 to 90% of the country. And then contested other areas as well. So basically, that's pre-9/11. Now let's move forward here. This is January. This is data from January 2019, and you can see here on the left-hand side. This is what the U.S. government are saying, that the Taliban only controls 44% of districts. Of course, closer look at the data, more objective look at the data, you'll see that it's actually more like 60 to 70% of the districts here. So basically, the conclusion here, Mike, is that the Taliban currently control more territory in Afghanistan than at any point since 9/11, since the U.S. invaded, bombed, and occupied Afghanistan along with its NATO partners. So of all the money that's been spent, 18 years of occupation, many, many thousands of lives lost, and the Taliban have expanded their control over the country of Afghanistan. So then the argument saying we need to stay longer. This is what the war lobby is saying. Well, we can't leave because we don't want to do what Obama did, which was an early withdrawal, too early of a withdrawal from Iraq in 2011, and that allowed the conditions for ISIS to emerge, et cetera, et cetera. So they're saying Trump's making the same mistake here. In other words, a war without end, an open-ended war. And so the war journalists, and I pulled this quote, this is one of the Times' war correspondents, Anthony Lloyd. He said, "Sometimes it is better to stick with the war that you know than the peace that you don't." That's a pretty powerful statement, Mike, and I'm going to say, with regard to some of these war journalists, if the war's over, boy, are they out of a job as well, because a lot of them have made great careers out of reporting the war, but not doing a whole lot to stop it, basically. And I'm not picking on Anthony Lloyd in particular from the Times, but I'm just saying this general attitude of, well, what are you going to do? We might as well just stay there forever, because if we don't, the Taliban are going to take over, and then we're going to have to go back in again and bomb them again and occupy them again and so forth. So it's a bit of a nihilistic attitude by some of these war journalists and expert analysts, Mike.
So let me ask, in all the discussion about this, all the discussion about the Taliban and so on, and when the US is going to leave Afghanistan, has the issue of opium been mentioned?
No, it is being mentioned more in the media right now, because there's an opioid crisis that has hit North America, and it's become an election issue. So you're starting to see at least being mentioned. Obviously, it's taken a couple of decades, right? But so the issue of opium is there, but there's been plenty of alternatives in Afghanistan that could have bypassed the current status quo, and these have been put down because the U.S., Britain, NATO have been hell-bent on imposing a Western-style government in Afghanistan from the very beginning. And that's like trying to put a square peg into a round hole. Okay? And it's not working, and you can see, we showed you the map, basically. It's not working. So I think the solution to Afghanistan is definitely going to be found within the tribal forms of government, and helping to foster and promote and help and aid, if possible, the tribal forms of government, and working with those rather than trying to impose a Western-style system there in the middle of Kabul.
Okay, well, let's head over to Russia now, and a number of mainstream media outlets reporting the Russian elections. Kremlin-backed parties take a hit is the headline on DW. And they're saying parties tied to the ruling United Russia have retained the majority in Moscow despite flagging support. Protests and the exclusion of opposition candidates put the poll under intense scrutiny. They say that although Putin is technically an independent, he has strong ties to United Russia, which reportedly came away with only 26 of Moscow's Duma's 45 seats, a major drop from the 38 it held before. Some former United Russia members had branded themselves independents before the vote, as support from the party has plummeted amidst rising poverty across the country. Two other parties are loosely controlled by the Kremlin. The Communists and the centre-left Adjust Russia are expected to win 14 and 4 seats respectively. Well, that's the results of the election. Of course, there was quite a furore over the last couple of weeks over allegations that Putin was somehow putting down any opportunity for protest or opportunity for opposition parties to get out amongst the public. In fact, Putin made some statements about that, about so long as the law isn't broken, people have absolutely right to assembly and to protest and so on. But nonetheless, something that the Russian government is protesting today is they have accused Facebook and Google of allowing political ads during the elections, despite a ban on running ads during the vote and the day before. So they didn't mince their words. They said that the ads were unacceptable, that this was interference in the sovereign affairs of Russia. They haven't said that what in this report anyway, which is clearly in Russian, but they haven't said what the implications are going to be for Google and Facebook. Google and Facebook, or at least Google at least, has responded by saying we support responsible political advertising and expect that it has to comply with local legislative demands during the laws, including the laws on elections and voting rights and mandatory election silence for any geographical areas where such advertising is oriented. So they're basically trying to push the blame onto the people in the local areas that were advertising, as if them as major tech companies couldn't do anything about that. But isn't it ironic that this debate has moved across into Russia, having been the core of effectively Trump's entire presidency so far, these types of allegations?
Well, I think it's also ironic then, Mike, that I can't even boost one of my own articles on my own page on Facebook because it's flagged up as political content. And they're not political articles, they're news articles.
Yes.
And this is on Facebook's platform. So I don't see why don't they just apply those same algorithms to flag up political advertising in Russia 48 hours before the election, polling day?
Could it be because Google and Facebook...
do they lack the tech?
I don't think they do. I think perhaps they are enthusiastic to see opposition in Russia take hold. Perhaps that's part of it.
Yes. Okay. So.
Yes. In the meantime, we don't need to worry because Google and Facebook are now teaming up with the BBC to deal with fake news. So this is the BBC's report from Saturday. Fake news, BBC and tech firms join forces to fight disinformation. Plans to help tackle so-called fake news have been announced by the BBC and some of the biggest names in journalism and technology. The new measures include an early warning system for use during elections or when lives may be at risk. So Google, Twitter, Facebook are all getting involved in this. The BBC are saying that these are crucial steps in fighting disinformation. So they're going to produce this global early warning system, creating a system so that organizations can alert each other rapidly when they discover disinformation that threatens human life or disrupts democracy during elections. Well, they didn't do that in Russia, it seems, so that hasn't worked very well. The emphasis will be on moving quickly and collectively to undermine disinformation before it can take hold. They're also going to get involved in media education, a joint online media education campaign to support and promote media education messages. And also voter information, cooperation on civic information around elections. So there's a common way to explain how and where to vote. And maybe how to, yes, exactly how to vote, who to vote for. Also shared learning, particularly around high-profile elections. So Tony Hall, who's the Director General of the BBC, said, disinformation and so-called fake news is a threat to us all. At its worst, it can present a serious threat to democracy and even to people's lives. This summit has shown a determination to take collective action to fight this problem. And we have even agreed some crucial steps towards this, so that is really exciting. The BBC, Facebook, Google and Twitter are going to fight disinformation by what? Killing any alternative narrative?
By censorship.
Absolutely.
So that what they've announced here is they're going to coordinate their censorship efforts. Because how do you determine, how do you judge what's fake news or what's disinformation? Because a lot of things that are being flagged as disinformation are in fact real information, but if they go against the official narratives or the establishment narratives, then they're flagged up immediately by the other trusted partners like the DFR Labs, the Atlantic Council, and some of these bizarre quangos that are basically given the hotline to executives at Facebook, and social media companies use them to advise them of who to deplatform, for instance. So big problem there. Big problem. Is that early warning system going to also apply to the BBC itself? Because what about the disinformation or fake news that they put up? What about the other mainstream media outlets? What about CNN? Is this early warning system going to be activated when they put up, when The Guardian puts up a fabricated story about Paul Manafort visiting Julian Assange multiple times in the Ecuadorian embassy in London? A completely made up story by Luke Harding, front page of The Guardian. Will that trigger this alarm system?
No.
And what good is it?
None whatsoever. It's only good for the government. Okay, we have to leave it there because we're past time. Thank you very much for joining us today, Patrick. Thank you for joining us. We will be back at the same time as usual, 1 p.m. on Wednesday. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.